Recently, we sat down with two Ironman world champions, 70.3 world champions, Olympic gold medalist, the Norwegians. And one of them said in that discussion,
FTP is a bit 2015, don't you think?
Yeah, I was fairly well put in my place there. And we thought this was worth a discussion, a debate even, and maybe we could discuss this topic along with others in a weekly video. So we're bringing in this video in which we will discuss topics from the triathlon world each week, and you too can suggest some topics for us in the comment section down below.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of like Coach's Corner, but sometimes Coach's Debate or Coach's Discussion. We don't even have a name for this segment yet, so if you have some ideas, leave them in the comment section down below. But let's get on with this week's discussion. FTP-based training is basically the gold standard when it comes to prescribing exercise intensity for cycling. And by that we mean it's the most used, most reliable, and most practical way of prescribing your cycling intensity, measuring your training workload, and measuring your cycling progress.
Yeah, and with power meters becoming more affordable and accessible, FTP-based training is becoming now useful for any athlete of any level. Now, your FTP, or functional threshold power, is theoretically the maximum power that you could sustain for an hour. And from that, you get your FTP, which you can then base your training zones from. And this is almost replacing heart rate-based training, which obviously has its limitations due to heart rate lag, creep, and systemic influences. And obviously, will replace things like RPE, which is very subjective.
Yeah. So if FTP-based training is so good, why then are the Norwegians scoffing at FTP and saying it's so 2015? Well, the Norwegians use what the so-called Norwegian method. And that means that basically they take a lactate profile for each athlete. And they get this lactate profile by taking many, and I mean many lactate measurements, which require taking blood every time you want to take that measurement. By doing this, they get a profile of what that athlete's lactic acid or lactate does while they're training, and then they use this to prescribe the intensity that they need to be working at to get the optimal amount of lactate buildup, but not go over the limits. And this is obviously what they're using day in and day out. But does that mean FTP is dead? Does that mean all of us should be starting to use lactate-based training? Well, we're going to have a bit of debate, and Mark's going to take the FTP is dead side of the debate, and I'm going to disagree with him.
Well, no one in the world of triathlon is more successful than Norwegians recently. So clearly, the future of triathlon training is lactate-based. And, well, let's face it, everyone is playing catch-up with the Norwegians, and I hazard a guess that in a few years, everyone will be doing lactate-based training. In fact, we've actually already seen a number of the pros, like Joe Skipper and various others, doing that themselves in their training.
True, but my first counterpoint to that would be that while those little lactate measuring devices that you see them using are fairly affordable and available now, widely available, they are still very impractical. I mean, you literally have to take blood throughout your session, either from your ear or from your finger. Unless you have a coach or a team of coaches going around with you, like the Norwegians do the whole time, it is wildly impractical to use your lactate measurements to prescribe your intensity, to even get the lactate profile that you need to do lactate-based training. You need so many measurements of your lactate response in all different scenarios that it's not practical for anyone, and it's also not very reliable.
So then you'll concede that FTP testing is or could be on its way out as lactate testing becomes more accessible, like power meters did, more affordable, and therefore then FTP numbers become less relevant and lactate numbers actually become the number we focus on.
Well, I don't think the lactate testing, I mean, you still have to prick your finger at this point, and it's still unreliable. I mean, I've done a fair amount of lactate testing, both on myself and on other athletes, and all kind of contaminants happen. A single drop of sweat and that whole sample is gone. It's just pointless. Like, it's really difficult to do effectively and well, and I cannot see many people doing it well enough without, like Oliver Alexander Boo, standing there doing it for you, getting anywhere near the reliability that they need to actually prescribe training based on it. To be clear, I think that if and when a wearable lactate measuring device is available, there will be some practical applications for the layman on the street to use lactate numbers in their training. But I think we're a long way off from that. And even when that does come, I still think that for the vast majority of sessions and the vast majority of situations, relating your power that you're putting out on the bike to your FTP is still going to be more relevant and more reliable than looking at your lactate numbers. FTP is in no way dead, and it's not even relegated to 2015. No ways.
All right, but the fact of the matter is, it is working for the Norwegians, and many of the pros are copying that, or were already doing it maybe. So maybe FTP isn't dead, but I believe it is being replaced. It's just a matter of time.
I can see your argument there, but I actually think that maybe the Norwegians are playing a bit of a game with everyone. Because it's wildly impractical without a whole coaching team around you to do it. They basically have this thing going, look what we're doing, this is what we're doing, and you can't really do it. So it's our advantage and you're never going to beat us, which is a pretty good game to play, to be honest. If you're going to go and carry a lactate measuring device in your pocket and try and do it yourself and get a bit of drip of sweat on it and your numbers are all over the place, you're just going to get frustrated and stop doing it. And you're going to look at the Norwegians and go, well, I'm just going to have to do it the hard way because I don't have those numbers. And I think maybe that's what they play. And I know that they say they don't know their FTP numbers, but I don't believe them on that. I think they know their FTP numbers. They even ride with power meters on their bikes. So I think they do know their power numbers, and I think they're playing a bit of a game by saying FTP is dead.
Okay, coming back to your previous point about wearable tech for live, real-time, maybe lactate measurement. Okay, it's not readily available yet. They are in the making, and hopefully they will come. So do you think when they are readily available and accessible maybe to everyone out there and they're affordable, it will replace FTP-based training and everyone's then training like the Norwegians?
Well, firstly, those wearable devices don't actually exist. There's actually two companies out there, K-Watch Athlete and IDRO, who both have websites claiming to be the world's first wearable lactate measuring device. And both of their websites also say, stay tuned, tech coming soon. How soon? Well, nobody really knows. It could be many years off still. There's some real practical difficulties that they have to overcome when it comes to measuring your lactate in your blood. You can't kind of measure it in your interstitial fluid or anything like that. So they're not there yet. However, I think even when they are there, even when you can run along with your watch on your wrist telling you exactly what your lactate level is, the practical application, the science of the practical application of that number, that information, is still going to be a few years in the making. You know, like when power meters arrived on bikes, it took a long time before there was this established FTP-based training where everyone measured the FTP and then based their zones around it. For a long time, it was just people measuring their power. And it's going to be the same with lactate. For a long time, people are just not going to have any practical use for the number that they get from this device when this device eventually exists. So FTP-based training is going nowhere. FTP-based training is not 2015. It's probably not even 2025. It'll probably be 2035 and we'll still be using FTP-based training.
James is very passionate about this, clearly. Well, there clearly is, and thanks to the Norwegians, a far bigger focus and discussion around lactate testing than there was a few years ago.
That is true, because lactate testing is not new.
No.
I mean, I was doing lactate testing 20 years ago when I did my sports science degree, and even then it wasn't new, and the devices aren't even new. They were that small back then.
But let's face it, back then, I mean, I used lactate testing as a swimmer and it was used occasionally, whereas now it's being used, I mean, take the Norwegians, for instance, on a daily basis.
Yes.
So I do believe when we have that wearable tech, and I believe it will come, it will be popular. And I think the endurance world is shouting and asking for it. And thanks also to the Norwegians sort of just making it, well, increasing people's knowledge or awareness of it and showing that it really does work.
Yeah, I think you probably are right. I do still think that FTP-based training is the only thing you need to be worrying about right now, you don't need to figure out what your lactate numbers are. Mark clearly thinks differently, and I'm going to see if this weekend when he goes out for his long run, we've got one of those lactate measuring devices upstairs, Mark. Are you going to slip that in your pocket and start measuring your lactate for me?
You know what the embarrassing
runs?
thing is? I've never actually taken my own lactate before, whereas I know you have, so I probably need to go do that.
Maybe you should try pricking your finger.
So I will jump in here and say, like, obviously we've been speaking a lot about the pros here, and I do realise that for the everyday athlete out there, this is a difficult thing to do at the moment and to interpret. So I do think we'll see a lot more of it for the pros in the immediate future, and I think the Norwegians have helped in that. I'm probably with you on the FTP-based training to a degree for the foreseeable future, because I do understand that you guys out there can just jump on your turbo tomorrow and just quickly update your numbers and know that you're training in the right zones. But I really do think lactate testing is the future. It's going to come.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a bit of a trickle-down effect too, as the Norwegians grow the area and people learn more about lactate profiles and what lactate does at different levels and how you can use lactate at different levels, which is what the Norwegians are so specializing in. It's going to trickle down to these are the intensities you should be doing more work at. You know, at the moment it's the 80-20. It's going to be a bit more Norwegian pyramid-based kind of thing where you're spending less time and etc. because people are going to get a better idea of the profile. But I don't think it's going to come from the whole masses doing lactate profile testing where they do 30 tests a day every time they're out exercising. I think it'll come from the top doing that, and then everyone else just using FTP and applying the knowledge about lactate to their daily training using FTP-based training. That's my 2 cents. Anyway, if you have an opinion on this, leave in the comment section down below. Mark and I could probably sit here and discuss it for the rest of the afternoon. I'd need to get another cup of coffee before we do that. But we are having a few more of these debates in the coming weeks, and we'd love to hear your opinion both on this one and also what you'd like us to discuss next time. So leave your comment down below, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, and also if you want to suggest a name for this little debate show, then also drop that in the comment section down below. See you next time.